My name is Candy Glenn Wilder. I am a fantasy writer and filmmaker, and my contemporary fantasy novel, Mark of the Champion, will be released next fall. The gentleman beside me is J.M. Celi, author of the dark fantasy novel A Flower in Hell. Both of us are members of Generation X, the generation everyone forgets about. And both of us will be completing and publishing our debut novels in 2022. Knock on wood.
Yeah.
We are doing this collaboration to talk about what it's like to start and complete a novel later in life. If YouTube videos and Instagram are any indication, the vast majority of independent novels are written by authors in their 20s and 30s. No shade on them, they write incredible books. Hi, Jenna. But if you're someone who's in what's called middle age and you have an idea for a story, but you're unsure how to proceed and might even think the opportunities passed you by, we're here to give you some insight and hopefully some encouragement to move forward with your writing. Okay, so what we have is a list of 10 questions that we are going to be asking each other back and forth so that you get sort of an idea of where we came from, what inspired us, how we started, and how we do our best to persevere to get that word count up and get the story done. So let's see, do you want to go first or should I go first?
Do we both answer each question?
Yeah, I think it's the method where one person asks, the second one answers, and then you ask back. So we end up both answering the question.
Sorry.
So what was the spark that made you want to be a writer?
I think for me, I was always trying to tell stories in one way or another. Usually it was through role-playing games. If it was Dungeons and Dragons, I had a story that I had in mind, that it was a narrative, but it was dependent on players. So they would take my story somewhere else, usually in places that I didn't expect, and ruin it. No. But the other method I used was I wrote comic books. And these were very amateur comic books. I used to do things in just pencil or just inks and, a lot of hand-drawn, well, of course, hand-drawn, but, literally just on scraps of paper and stuff like that. And I was never able to really get my stories out, in a medium that really worked for me. I needed more depth, I needed more detail, and I needed total control. So, after decades of kind of spinning my wheels on all these ideas I had, I decided I needed to really just buckle down and write a book. It was really the only way I was going to tell some of these stories that are in my head.
Nice. I wanted to do comic books years ago, but I had no drawing ability whatsoever. And I wasn't actually that well versed in them because I didn't have the money to be able to invest in all of the incredible series that came out back in the 70s and the 80s.
Yeah.
But I think the main thing that inspired me, well, there were a bunch of other, just various things that put the spark in me that I wanted to be a writer. One of them was when I was really young, it was like in grade school age, there was a library that was across the way from our elementary school. And this library had some incredible children's level books. And one of the books I read was a story called The Mountain of Truth by Dale Carlson. It was an extremely influential book. It presented a story that I related to so much. One of the main themes that has always stuck with me is the person who doesn't fit the standard hero trope or the standard successful man or woman trope. It was the one who was a step down, who didn't have the powers that his brother had, who didn't have the finesse or the feeling of security that other girls had. And I just felt this so much, and it was sort of a constant in my life. And I thought to myself, okay, I want to write a story about someone who has these insecurities and has been brought up with them all their life. and perseveres over them and has a happy ending for it. And it took me decades from the time I was a child until I actually started writing Mark of the Champion in my 40s that I was actually able to get the ball rolling. And that's what I've been moving forward since that.
Yeah.
Okay, I think next question is your turn.
Yeah. So who or what inspired you when you started writing?
Well, you and I both grew up in the 70s and 80s,
Yeah.
and there were a lot of incredible movies that came out during that time. Star Wars, of course. We both have the same love for our alternate universe of choice.
Yes.
There were also the Spielberg movies as well. There were John Hughes movies. There was Ghostbusters. There were all these incredible, funny and poignant and action-packed and just filled with every good thing you can imagine. I mean, Goonies, for crying out loud, you know?
Yeah.
And they were great role models to look up to. I always wanted to be a filmmaker since that point. I even went to college and I got my BA in filmmaking. I've only made 3 short films. I'm very proud of them, but for various reasons, I haven't been able to continue. But I just really loved presenting stories that aren't really like so dark and gritty. It was more like a mixture of, yes, there was some dark stuff, but there was also light stuff mixed into it. And it was a really full, well-rounded, completed story. And
Yeah.
again, that was always the kind that I wanted to tell. And so, yeah, the Lucas, Spielberg, and John Hughes era was a huge influence on me. So, who or what inspired you when you started writing?
Well, it's kind of it's actually a little embarrassing because my childhood, although I was inspired by movies to be sure, but when it came to writing, I really wasn't much of a reader through my childhood, even in through high school. To me, back then, reading was something that your English teacher made you do. You know, it was work. You know, like here's this dry, moldy book that was written 100 years ago. You needed to read it, and it's your homework. You know, the idea of reading for pleasure was just blew my mind. I'm like, this is boring. Like, why would someone just want to sit in a chair and read? Like, go watch a movie, go outside, you know. And my problem was that I just didn't find the right book until I did. And for me, those books were a series of books set in a Dungeons and Dragons world called Dragonlance. And these were a couple of trilogies. There was actually many, many books, but the original books were 2 trilogies written by Margaret Weiss and Tracy Hickman. And it was something I gave a shit about. I was like reading these books. I'm like, oh my God, this is content that I like. You know, I'm not being forced to read, you know, I can't even think, you know, like some Ralph Waldo Emerson poem or something like that. Like this was stuff I cared about, something that mattered to me. I played Dungeons and Dragons. This was taking place in a fantasy world. I had tried to read The Hobbit, couldn't get through it. Drove me crazy. All the exposition and info dumping, I couldn't get through The Hobbit. I'm sorry. You know, that's a big unpopular opinion, I realize. But
that's a real hot take there.
It's the truth. Dragonlance changed my whole thing. And then I tried to take my main character in A Flower in Hell, Cynthia. I tried to actually tell her story decades ago, maybe 30 years ago. And if I could ever dig up that manuscript, it was written in the narrative voice of these other authors because I didn't know what else to draw upon. I hadn't read enough. When they say that you need to, if you want to write, you have to read, you know, and I was not well read. I just didn't have a lot in my arsenal. And the manuscript was awful. And I just kind of gave up and went back to playing. But I always wanted to come back to it. And that's when I started reading, really reading and picking up books and getting into the fantasy genre and stuff like that, reading Jim Butcher and Kevin Hearn and Patricia Briggs and a lot of which none of them, by the way, are medieval fantasy, but I always wanted to go back and write that Cynthia story that I started in the early 90s that just never got told. At what age or at what point did you decide to take writing seriously?
Well, I thought that I had taken it seriously when I decided to start working on what would eventually become Mark of the Champion. And this was back in 2007. I was doing a lot of writing on my breaks at work. I had a Alpha Smart Neo, which is one of those little keyboards that it's super heavy duty and it ran on 4 AA batteries. I still have it. It still works
Oh,
great.
wow.
And I just took it with me and wrote it all. I pantsed the entire first half of my book. It's just
Yeah.
back then there was no YouTube. There was no gurus to tell you how to outline things or how to plan or tropes. None of that stuff. I
Yeah.
mean, you might have been able to find it in a bookstore if you knew where to look, but I had this concept in mind of a main character who felt insecure and like sort of like didn't fit in and was thrust into this really dangerous situation. And she has to figure out, okay, how am I going to survive this? And not only that, how am I going to rescue my friends that got taken away? So I went through and passed the first part of the book, and I had this companion that she travels with, and things were going great. And then I just came to a dead stop because I knew what I wanted to do, but I had absolutely no idea how I was going to do it. And I thought it was just so far beyond me that I ended up just leaving it in 2008. And it sat on my Alpha Smart for a long, long time. And other things happened. I got my degree, I made my films. My husband had brain cancer surgery. And so we had those years where he had to undergo therapy and radiation and chemo and all of that. And then it was about 2017. I hadn't done anything really since I had to put the first half aside in 2007. And then I had come up with some ideas. Well, maybe I can do this. I had this sort of paranormal thriller, yes, I can talk, paranormal thriller idea in mind. And I thought, well, maybe I could use this. And I thought, well, maybe I could just cannibalize some characters from my old story. So I opened up the files, I looked at them, and then I got sucked right back into the story again. And it's like, I love this story. And not only that, since I had 10 years of reading and watching media and having all of my own life experiences in taking care of my husband and also my mom, somehow all those things came together and I knew how to write what I wanted to write. I didn't like do a meticulous planning, but I did plan out each chapter. I knew what I wanted to have happen. And so I wrote down the little steps and then I was able to write that from there. And then I completed my first draft in January of 2018 and I cried when I got to the end. Yes, that was my long saga of when I decided to take it seriously. So when you were writing back then and also at the current time, was there anyone who just encouraged you or discouraged you when you were putting your book together?
Yeah, my no one discouraged me. First of all, no one discouraged me. From everyone, so I got support from everybody, my friends, my family, my wife. Everyone was extremely supportive. When I finished my rough draft, my first draft in March of this year, 2021, I got an outpouring of congratulations and support on Facebook. I just kind of announced it to my friends and family, and people saying, I want to read it, and lots of encouragement. So I've been very fortunate with it. It's funny, you see these YouTube videos about the type of people you run into out there when you say, oh, I'm writing a book. And then people go, oh, you want to waste your time? What are you going to make a living off it? I haven't run into any of those people at all. I've heard they're out there. I've been very lucky, and I've gotten just wonderful support from my friends and family.
That's great. I haven't run into any of those people either. Knock on wood again. I know that my mom and my husband have always been my biggest cheerleaders. Although my mom is still wondering why I haven't given her my manuscript to read. And I'm like, because it's not done. It's not finished. I'll give it to you when it's completed. And but yeah, I always got encouragement from I'd have coworkers who'd say that they wanted to read my book, so I figured, okay, well, they'll be beta readers, and I gave them a few chapters, and they never followed through with it completely. But from the chapters they read, one of them talked about just how blown away she was by the quality of my writing. And that made me feel pretty good. It's like, it's okay if they, they're coworkers. It's okay if they don't read the whole thing. But if they like what they see at the beginning, when the book comes out, I have a feeling they might go ahead and go through the whole book.
Yeah.
And so that's what makes me feel good at the end of the day, is that, yeah, I planted that seed in there. They're going to be coming back.
That's nice. Yeah, it's a good feeling.
So apart from writing and self-editing, what do you find to be the toughest part of the publishing process?
So far, I haven't, so as far as the publishing process, I have not started recruiting editors. I haven't really even made up my mind whether I'm going to go traditional or self-publish yet. But in either direction, I have not started query letters. I have not started talking to editors or proofreaders or any of those folks. I'm still finishing up my beta reading phase as of this recording and making edits based on that. So far, I'd say the toughest part so far has been managing time. And that's when I think I felt it the most. Well, I felt it in two places. One, when I was knee deep in critique partners, because I actually had more than 3 critique partners, because I had some that were kind of, I'll read a chapter of yours, and then you read a chapter of mine, and then when I write one, then you read that, and I'll read the next one of yours. And it was kind of an unconventional way to do it. Instead of like, I read your whole manuscript, you read mine. But, to each their own. I was trying to, I didn't mind it at all. But because of that, I still had a completed manuscript where I needed to have critique partners that I know were going to have a finished thing to read for me and for them. So the hardest part for me was managing time, because I'm reading 3 books kind of at once during this process, as well as going back over their input and making edits on my manuscript. So reading 3 books, making edits, and then, working a full-time job, being a husband and father, right? That was, I think, time management was probably my most challenging thing. Rewarding, fun, yes, but just, I needed more time to get things done.
Yeah, I feel that. I also work full-time, and when I first started, when I joined Cyborg Central, and I was able to find 3 critique partners, and yeah, the same deal. I'm reading, 3 books while they're reading mine, and going back and forth, and that can be a little maddening at times, because you're trying to keep track of not only your story, but also what's happened in your partner's stories. And the beta process was a little easier for me. I had seen a couple of videos, one of them was from Aaron Kinsella about how to organize beta readers, and that was a big help. But yeah, having to work a full-time job and also cram in writing a ginormous novel and going through all the revisions. The revisions, they weren't really like hard, but they were time consuming. One of the toughest things that I had to go through. I mean, it wasn't tough or like it was grueling, but it was more like it was very sobering and humbling. But for my book, I had to hire two different sensitivity readers. And the reason is that one of my characters is of Hawaiian descent. He's also half
Oh,
Scottish.
oh
It's
wow.
Keoki. You saw the portrait of him.
Mm.
That's who that is. So I knew that I needed to get a sensitivity reader who was of Hawaiian descent and knew about Hawaiian culture. And so I sent the manuscript to her. She liked it, but she also found a heck of a lot of stuff that needed changing. And I was
Oh,
looking
okay.
through there and I thought, oh my goodness, what have I done? I mean, she was correct about everything. And
Yeah.
there were a couple of things where I had to sort of negotiate with her. Well, it would be okay if I did it this way. And we got to a point to where what I wanted to do to modify it was acceptable. And my second sensitivity reader was Iona Wayland. Um,
Oh,
yes, the author of
yeah.
Ashes. And
Yes.
she had me make a major change to my main character, which I kind of pushed back against at first, but then she told me why it would be a good idea to make the change. And so I did. And so I realized that even though the change had to be made, it didn't lessen who she was as a person and the struggle she had and the representation that she presented. So, yeah, that was, even more than any of the other crazy stuff with the swaps and everything, having to just be willing at the start to eat humble pie over whatever your sensitivity readers point out, that has been probably the most insightful and yet toughest part of writing and publishing for me.
Yeah. I
Okay.
think I read six to you.
Sure, why not?
um, how do you approach marketing yourself and your book, and how effective has it been? Is there a certain method that works for you?
As far as marketing myself and my book and how effective has it been, not very at all.
Mm,
I have a grand total of, I think, like 10 YouTube subscribers, and I've been on it for like over a year and a half now. I have been trying some different ways to market myself. I'm not that good at it. I think I must be
yeah.
part communist because anything having to do with marketing and commerce just kind of flies over my head. But which is probably not that good a thing to talk about in a video that's going out to a bunch of people. But I don't know if there even is. I'm still looking for that method that works for me. My main platform that I post on is Instagram. I do have some fun with that, and
Mhm.
sometimes I get some attention for a couple of posts. But because of my
Yeah.
life with the full time job, and also I'm a caregiver to both my husband and my mom,
Yeah.
you know, I just, there's no time to plan a big, huge campaign like some of these
Yeah.
other authors are able to do. So it's rough. And
Yeah.
I'm hoping that I find something that does work for me. But right now, it's just still kind of flailing around, hoping to grab a life raft.
Yeah. I can definitely relate. I mean, I'm not a caregiver, but I have a full-time job, and I'm not a full-time writer. I don't have that kind of time. So it's challenging. For my marketing, I'm still trying to find my way. There's some things where I'll pick up some subscribers and I'll be like, great, be it YouTube or Twitter, and I'll be like, great, I'll do that again. And then it's like lightning doesn't strike twice. And I'm like, okay. So I'm still trying to work it out.
Yeah. it's tough because it seems like, I mean, no shade on younger people at all, but I am just amazed at how they are so proficient at TikTok and Twitter and making reels on Instagram and just doing all
Yeah,
these incredible, amazing things that somehow I thought I was going to be able to do and have the inspiration for. And it's like at the end of the day, I'm just like, I'm just too exhausted to think about that,
yeah,
you know?
yeah,
So, and Twitter, I don't get Twitter at all. I'm just not a Twitter person. Anything, I
yeah,
mean, I'll post to it, but usually it's just like posting a link from Instagram or so.
yeah. I Twitter, it's work. It's really it is work. It's staying up with all these social media platforms and just posting and posting and posting and networking and talking about your book and attracting followers and keeping followers. And it's a learning process definitely for me.
Yeah, I I hope I catch on quicker. I really do. Okay, so what were some of your earlier attempts at writing before your current work in progress?
Well, I talked about one of them, which was an attempt to write Cynthia, my main character, Cynthia's story back in the early 90s. And that was about, I think I wrote like 30,000 words, and it was very rough, very rough. And, like you said, I didn't know the craft, right? There was no YouTube or anything like that. And I didn't know how to write. So there was all the cardinal sins of passive voice and jumping out of like third person deep to third person, I don't know, pick your flavor, like just the POV, like the POV stayed with Cynthia, the main character, but it would jump into various degrees of third person,
Mm-hmm.
and I went into omniscient suddenly, and then it'd be like deep, and then I'd be like limited, and it was really, really sloppy. And I lost steam on it and went back to comic books. And I got into like, they were more like superhero comic books and stuff like that. Then I tried doing a Cynthia comic book, because I'm like, I want to tell her story. And then all through the 2000s, finally I was like, this needs to be a book. But really my earliest attempts was one failed attempt at writing a novel and comics.
Well, my earliest attempt at writing was when I was about either 4 or 5 years old, and
Wow.
I wrote a story called The Golden Potato Chip. And it was about this little girl who was walking along and she found this potato chip on the sidewalk. She didn't do anything about it, but she just, noticed that there was a golden potato chip there on the ground. And so she skipped along. And then overnight, this potato chip grew to the size of a house.
Oh,
And the next morning, the little girl came out and said, "Wow, look at that huge golden potato chip. It's the size of a house." The end.
well, you're four,
Remember, I
what,
was 4 years
4 or 5?
old.
Yeah, I mean, that's
But after that, when I got older, of course, with all the influence of Star Wars, and my friend and I were fans of the cinematic Bakshi Lord of the Rings, the one
mm,
where it only told like half the story. But it was like gorgeously animated, and I was a big fan of that. So, that was nice because we could get the whole story of Lord of the Rings without having to read the thing. Um, so that, in addition to Star Wars and all the other directors and their movies that I mentioned earlier, got me into fanfic. So
oh
I
wow.
wrote a lot of fanfic. I wrote a fanfic after the Michael Keaton Batman movie came out.
Oh, cool.
I wrote Star Wars fanfic. There was one time, and it wasn't that many years ago, I had some friends on Tumblr that posted fic on Tumblr before everybody moved to AO3. And so for a while, I was trying to do a Star Wars How to Train Your Dragon crossover.
Oh
And
wow.
I got pretty far, but then that was the time when I thought, well, okay, I'd like to write a serious book for NaNoWriMo. And that was when I got back into Mark of the Champion, what would become Mark of the Champion, and finished that. So, yeah, so I started with, little 4-year-old tales, and then went to fanfic, and then it went to actual fiction. So
Cool.
that's the deal on that. How do you juggle writing with your family time and responsibilities?
Ah, um, I try to do a little bit if I can at night, maybe if there's a little bit of time, like, I tell my wife, hey, I'm going to grab 15 minutes, 20 minutes, respond to some emails, respond to some YouTube posts, blah, 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 blah. Every Thursday I post my video. So I take a half hour or so to post that, blast it on social media platforms, and do those sort of things. So I may do a little each day, but then I have one day a week. And that changes depending on a given week. It might be one day or a different day, depending on what's going on in the writing community, where I take the evening. I kind of get out of work, spend some time with my family, but then say from like 7 p.m. or 8 p.m. onward, it's heads down writing or doing writerly type stuff. And that may collaborate around or revolve around someone's doing a writing sprint live stream that I want to join, or I just need to buckle down and write some stuff on my own, or do my edits, or update my webpage, or whatever. That one day a week I kind of put aside to get all that kind of stuff done.
I know that for my juggling, I talked about a little earlier. Um, I have my mom, and she lives in Leisure World, which is 25 miles away from here, and my husband who lives with me. So it's a little bit easier when I'm at home, but when I'm taken away because mom needs help, in addition to, again, working full time and all of that. I remember, huh, back in the old days before the pandemic, I used to go to Coffee Bean and Tea Leaf all the time. That was my refuge. I would go there with my composition books and my colored pens, and I get the tallest ice blended dark chocolate mocha thing I could get, and that was writer's fuel. Is liquid chocolate was writer's fuel for me, and
Yeah.
I got so much work done in that coffee house, and it's still there, but because of all the craziness from last year going into this year, and now it looks like it's going to be going into next year, I mean, I really miss it. I'm just glad that I've already got the book pretty much done. I mean, it's at the proofreader. It's with Megan right now. So,
Oh, you're
but
using Megan.
yeah, yeah, yeah. She told
Megan
me to write.
Aldridge,
Mhm.
proofreader extraordinaire.
Yep. Shout out to Megan. Everybody use her. I don't know. Number 9 might be kind of a redundant question, but what are the biggest obstacles or hurdles that you experience while you're writing? Like if you run into a plot point, or like you come to a dead stop and you're not sure what to do.
Oh yeah, well, yeah, because we already talked about things like time and other outside obligations, but within writing itself,
Yes.
um, I would have to say research, and that I know different writers have their own methods,
Mhm.
and some people will be like, blah 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 blah. Research this later, put in brackets, and then just keep writing. I am a pain in my own ass because I can't do that. I should do that, but I can't because I hit that plot and then it's like I need to know how this works. I need to go research, you know, how do you control the little winch on a castle that lowers the portcullis to keep what is that actually, how many dudes does it take to crank the thing, right? I don't know. So I go research that and I can't write anymore until I solve that and put So 3 guys grab the thingy, and then I can go on my merry way. So I try to get all my research done during the outline phase. But as you know, things change. And, there's a little bit of pantsing that's always going to wind its way in, at least for me, no matter how much I outline. And suddenly I'm off doing something. It's still within the outline, but I need to flesh out something that I didn't anticipate. I'm like, oh, I need to research this. And then suddenly it's like, oh, out comes the browser. Like I leave Scrivener and I go into the browser and it's like, now I've broken my whole immersion into so sometimes I'm like, I'll research a thing and I'd be like, yeah, I'm done for the day. Like I just killed my whole momentum because I have to stop to research something.
I have troubles with research too, only I think my method has been more like since I had the idea of what I wanted from the chapter, I'd make some notes. I wouldn't necessarily write a whole structured outline, but there's a section in the book where a group of people are temporarily transformed for a while into sea creatures.
Oh, wow.
And there's this group of people, along with everybody else, that this happens to. And this group of people happen to be from Scotland. And so I was researching, okay, what's the most ubiquitous fish in Scotland? And it's the northern pike. So I was reading fascinating fun facts about the northern pike, in that it was a freshwater fish, but it can also, on occasion, go out to brackish water that's by the seashore, to get food or whatnot there. And I just, I thought to myself, okay, so you have these Scottish fish, these Scottish freshwater fish, and they are so stubborn. They will go out into brackish water to get what they want, despite the fact that it has salt in it, and it could, possibly hurt them. And that is the most Scottish thing I have ever heard of in my life. And so that's included in the book. And when you get to that point in the story, you'll see what I mean. But yeah, so research, I just kind of do it like if I run against a little block and says, you need to research this, then yeah, I might take an hour or maybe even a couple of days to find out what's going, apply that to the plot point, and then move on. It's not efficient, but it sure is fun. Looks like we're down at number 10. Dun, 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 confetti.
Right. So what advice would you give to folks who are starting their writing career later in life?
I would say go for it and don't be afraid to reach out to others for help. There are so many resources. There's YouTube. There are incredible craft books that are written by amazing authors who have gone through all of the Sturm und Drang that we've just been talking about. There's just so many resources available to you that weren't around back in the 2007s or even the 2010s. You have a wealth of information. And not only that, there is a wealth of ways to connect with other authors. I mean, you and I are both in Cyborg Central. It was the best thing that I could have done in order to get my book moving forward. And I'm sure you pretty much feel the same.
Yeah.
And there are other servers. There's Sasha Black. There's Sarah Werner. There are so many people who want to help you succeed. They'll help you with plotting. They'll help you with learning how to research, how to do an outline, how you can, find point of view, tone, perspective, what type of character you want, what type of story you want.
Yeah.
There's just so much available. You can just reach right in and start going for it, and you will find tons more people ready to support you than other jerks who might try to tear you down. Just don't listen to them and just go for it, because this is probably the best time in history for people to be able to publish the book that they want to write.
Yeah, I think if you want to write, you know, I hopefully your age is never a consideration. I mean, if you want to do something that you think you're going to enjoy or love, go for it. I mean, it's never too late, I guess is probably my advice. It's never too late. If you want to write, if you want to learn an instrument, if you want to paint, if you want to go canoeing, whatever you want to do, it's never too late, you know. And you said it best. There's a wealth of resources out there that have never been stronger, and they get stronger every year that goes by too. Not that you should wait, but they, you know, all these resources didn't exist, you know, when I was younger. You know, you mentioned earlier in the video that so many writers, they know that they want to write from the get-go as kids or in high school, and they come out of the gate in their 20s, 30s, they're published. And, you know, for someone like me, that first of all, I didn't have those aspirations when I was in my 20s and 30s, but also the resources that you talked about didn't exist. I didn't have YouTube. When I really started my first draft of A Flower in Hell, it was 2016. And I hadn't even discovered, I mean, of course I knew about YouTube, but I hadn't even discovered AuthorTube yet. And I had written like, I don't know, 3 or 5 chapters before I found some AuthorTubers. And then I immediately went back and revised everything. I realized like, it was like, oh, that's how you write words that sound good together. You know? And I went back and fixed a lot of stuff. But no, it's never too late. Go for it. I know I have a lot of friends that tell me, oh, I want to write a book. I want to write a book. Write the book. Just do it. You know, there's nothing stopping you except yourself.
Yep. Sage words. Sage words. Well, I think this has been a wonderful and very deep and, I don't know, revelatory sounds like too fancy a word, but it just seemed like there was loads of good information,
yeah,
that we were able to bring forth. And so that makes me happy. And let's see. Well, now we're done with all the questions and stuff. Kind of didn't think about this last part here, but oh, well, one thing is that if you like to check us out further, you can check out all of our socials. They are below in the description. You can read the first chapter of A Flower in Hell on Jamie's website, which will be also in the description. I had posted the first 8 pages of the first chapter of Mark of the Champion, but I will soon be increasing that to at least 3 chapters, if not more. So if you want to find out when those will be posted, go ahead and sign up for my newsletter. Also sign up for Jamie's and just have a grand time. That sounded corny as hell, didn't it?
it sounded good. It was sincere.
Okay. Okay, well, I think that this is a good time to completely forget what I was going to say. What am I going to do for an outro? Well, I guess I'll just say the thing I always say at the end of my videos. I wish you all the success in your writing journey, and always remember that Aunt Fishy believes in you. That's right, you too. All right. Bye.
Bye. Thanks for watching.
Thank you.